Tom Landa joins us now for more on that conversation. Tom, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this evening. Firstly, good to see that you're in a better facility and getting much better care, and thank you for having given us the time to talk to us. In the 14 days that you were at the Helen Joseph facility, what would be your review if you were to give a score to this I Serve with a Smile campaign that the department says is in operation in terms of the experience of clinical care?
Thanks, Thabo. Thanks for having me on the program, firstly. I'd just like to clear up a few misconceptions, things that I haven't alleged and haven't said. I've never criticized the nursing staff at Helen Joseph Hospital. My experience of the nursing staff is when you get there, they're a little frosty towards you. But when people see that you respect them and they respect you, after a few days, you develop a good relationship with the nurses, and they're really helpful. In fact, I think it's the nurses that hold the hospital together. That's number one. I never criticized the nurses. Number two, I never said I didn't get the correct clinical care at Helen Joseph. I believe that I was getting the correct clinical care. So those are the two things that have been put into the story that I just haven't said.
Yeah.
And although I did take some pictures of the infrastructure problems were not my criticism.
Yes.
They were not the reason I left.
Yeah.
The main reason I left Helen Joseph Hospital was the treatment of the doctors towards me, but even more than that, the treatment that I saw the doctors giving other patients around me.
Yes.
And after almost 2 weeks of watching people being treated really badly, without dignity,
yeah.
without kindness,
yeah.
without care. It was one of the things that precipitated me making the video, being so angry, and also signing myself out. There were two more things that contributed to me deciding I wanted to leave. One was the night before I left, I'd just fallen asleep on a bed similar to this one, and I had my cell phone next to my head, which is how most of us in the ward were sleeping, with our phones close by, so that we didn't lose sight of them. And someone from another ward came in while I was sleeping and stole my cell phone from my bed next to my head. And the guy in the bed opposite me was kind of asleep, but he thought he saw someone take my phone. And he said, "Tommy," and I said, "Yes." He said, "Have you got your phone?" I said, "No." He said, "Some short woman just took it." And I jumped out of bed immediately and I started shouting to security and nurses, "They must look for a short woman. She's stolen my phone." What I didn't know, she was a patient from 4 wards down. She was already back in her bed. But one of the guys from my ward picked up his phone and dialed my number. And there happened to be a nurse next to her bed at the time who heard my phone vibrate, and she was trying to switch it off and take the SIM card out under the blankets. And I managed to get my phone back. But I started worrying about my safety. I didn't know if I wanted to close my eyes at night. And then the final straw for me was, there was a gentleman in a bed diagonally opposite me who was terminal. He had liver failure and he was going to die. I knew he was going to die. Excuse me. He didn't die because of Helen Joseph. He died because of his own actions. But the morning that I decided to leave, the Saturday morning, he died at about 6 o'clock in the morning. And then there was about an hour and a half period or so where doctors came running and tried to revive him, which I thought was really weird because they were the ones that said he was terminal and was going to die. And then it looked like a Hollywood ER show while they tried to revive this guy, and there was no ways they were ever going to get that right. And they were the ones that said he was going to die anyway. Anyway, they didn't revive him, and he passed on. And then his body was left there for hours.
Yeah.
And for my time in Ward 8, there were a collection of flies that fly around the ceiling. They're there all day. Maybe there are 100 of them or so inside the room. But they don't bug you because they don't come down to bed level. But you're conscious of them 3 meters up or so, you know. And I didn't have a problem with them because they never came near me. And I also didn't want anyone to spray Doom or something because I can't breathe properly. So I had no problem with these flies. But when this guy died, they went to his body. And more flies came through the window. So we're talking hundreds of flies that were crawling over this guy's body for hours. And then they started flying around the room and landing on me and the other patients. And so all of a sudden I had flies on me crawling on my skin that had just come from this dead guy, crawling on my drinking glass. And I thought, you know what? I can't handle the treatment that the doctors give us. I don't mean clinical treatment. I mean the way they treat you as a human being.
Yes.
I don't just mean me. I mean the people I saw around me too.
Yeah.
I'm scared to close my eyes in this hospital now, and I don't want to have a dead man's flies on me.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to get out of here. And that's when I was angry enough to make the video. And that's when I RHT'd and I refused treatments and I left. Yes, I shot some video.
I want to circle to this issue of the doctors, because when we asked the department said, no, part of what they are doing, one, is to train doctors on communication skills. They use what they call an IDET model of communication. So they say the doctors must identify themselves, even the nurses, everybody, identify yourself, be polite, tell them exactly what the procedures are and so on and so forth. Do they do that? Is that the model that is being used?
No, I'd say the majority of them haven't been doing that. I don't know why. Maybe they're overworked. Maybe they're unhappy with their jobs. Maybe there's a new generation of doctors who aren't being trained the same. I'm not sure. But you can see doctors walk up to people and not introduce themselves. The first question they might ask is, have you had bloods drawn today? I've seen patients say, doctor, I'm in pain, receive no medication or explanation why they're not getting pain medication. The guy who'd passed away in the bed, diagonally opposite me, 2 days before he died, he had a lumbar puncture procedure where they stick needles in your spine. There were 5 doctors around his bed. And of course, they were restraining him because he didn't want to have this procedure. They were holding him. And he was screaming like an animal throughout this procedure, probably 10 minutes or so. And while the doctors were doing the procedure, they were discussing their bonuses. They were discussing the cars that they drove. And they were discussing restaurants in the areas that were good to eat at. And I thought that was totally inappropriate. And the more I watched this behavior from the doctors, I wondered why people in a profession where you take an oath to be compassionate and kind weren't showing the patients compassion and kindness. Now, there's been a lot of criticism leveled at me over the last few days that I criticized the clinical care. I've never criticized the clinical care. The department's right that I was being treated clinically and I was being treated properly, but I wasn't being treated with respect, and neither were the people around me. And a lot of people have said that I've been nitpicking. But the interesting thing is that the dean of the Faculty of Medicine, the head of medicine at Wits University, today issued a circular to all students and staff, reminding them that they need to start acting compassionately towards patients, and reminding them of the oath they took, and asking them to report anybody that they work with who's not giving compassion, care, and kindness. In fact, the dean of Wits Faculty of Medicine went so far as to say that they need to treat the patients as if it was their own family coming in for treatment. And I feel I've been vindicated. Number one, by that actually Wits has had to remind their students and staff that they need to treat patients with dignity. But more than that, the videos that I've made, if you look underneath those videos at the thousands of comments from South Africans from all walks of life, you will find stories exactly like mine where people said they've been disrespected by the doctors in our healthcare institutions. And that's why I spoke up. I spoke up because I thought that our doctors needed a wake-up call, that they need to start treating patients with dignity, not like we hobos off the street, not like we cockroaches or animals. People can't afford medical aid, so you're subhuman. I think that that's totally wrong. And a lot of people are scared to speak up. A lot of people are scared that if they speak, medical treatment will be withheld or they'll get into trouble. And I thought, I'm going to speak up and get out of here. I've faced so much flack in the last day. I've now been called an agent. I've been called a spy. I've been called a proxy for political parties that want to destroy the NHI. None of that is true. And I understood finally what it's like when you speak truth to power.
We'll circle to that particular bit. Let's talk about Ward 8. I mean, the other claim that we heard yesterday in our conversation was that Mr. London, yes, could have seen a pipe or two that would have been burst and no water coming out, and maybe the ceiling that needs to be repainted and whatnot. But the ward is habitable. Not to the standards, maybe of Morningside, but habitable.
I agree. It is habitable. And I didn't have a problem with the peeling paint. I didn't have the problem that we weren't able to bath. We washed with bowls at 4 o'clock every morning. I mean, I didn't enjoy sleeping on a mattress that was so thin that I was on springs, but it was better than sleeping on the floor. And I understood that I'm in a healthcare facility that is strained, that is at capacity. And so, although I took a few pictures of it, that was not my complaint. But here's the problem, okay? When you're in a facility where you can't bath, when you're in a facility where the mattresses are too thin and your back is getting sore after 2 weeks, when you're in a facility where the plugs next to your bed are blown, when you're in a facility where there are flies in the room, when you're in a facility where the food isn't great, and then on top of that, you add the uncaring nature of the doctors, it starts to become very difficult for people to heal physically and emotionally. And so I don't exclude the infrastructure problems, but that wasn't something that I was ever going to say I can't live in this environment, but I can't live in that environment and get bad treatment by the people who are supposed to be decent towards me.
Right. I mean, and unfortunately, you've been called an agent anti-NHI, but one of the speakers said, well, Mr. London should actually then, because of that experience, be the one who is an advocate for NHI to bring equity into the system, because it exposes, again, a system that is carrying 80% of the load, they say, with 20% of the budget.
So firstly, I'm a socialist/capitalist. I believe we should have a healthcare system in this country that anyone can walk into any hospital and get treatment. The concept of the NHI is not something that I'm against. The concept of healthcare for all of us is something that I'm in favor of. But the very same people who are going to create an NHI are the people who are running our institutions at the moment, and they're substandard. So I question how the NHI is going to be so much better when it's the very same people who are going to run it. And so, I'm worried that we've got this habit in this country that when there's a crack in the wall, then we put some wallpaper over it. And I'll give you an example. For years, we've been seeing posters with Batupile on the walls, people first. Well, it hasn't worked. When you go into a police station, you don't feel like the police officer has got that attitude of Batupile, people first. You don't feel it inside a clinic, or you don't feel it inside a hospital. So why didn't we get Batupile right? Instead, we're going to push that aside, and we call in this new campaign Service with a Smile, or whatever it might be. Well, I challenge you to ask your viewers to call in and ask them whether they do get service with a smile inside Helen Joseph and hospitals. I guarantee you that the majority of South Africans are going to say that they don't get service with a smile. And for me, that's just putting wallpaper over the Batupile crack that didn't work. Yes. And when the new one doesn't work, they're going to come up with a new campaign in 5 years and put some new wallpaper over it. Yes. And I worry that the NHI is another layer of wallpaper over a system that is dysfunctional. Yeah. I'm not against the concept of an NHI. In fact, I'm in favor of it.
Now, one of the issues that I also raised with them is this issue that you raised of the unfortunate patient who had to, of course, succumb to the diseases that he was battling with. Yes. and being left there at least from 6 in the morning. And we also put it to the nurses to say, what could have happened there? My question was, was there system failure there between what should happen in terms of how services are rendered? Because the nurses, we've done everything that we needed to do. The doctor says we've done everything that we needed to do. Yes. The porters were supposed to have come, but the porters were on shift change, or the porters were busy with other functions.
Yes, it took too long for the porters to arrive. Yeah.
It
wasn't the nurse's fault. It wasn't the doctor's fault. There was a problem with the porter services that morning.
Yeah. And what could have been that problem? Are they also overloaded?
I don't know. I don't know how many people die every day at Helen Joseph. So I don't know what the capacity is for the porter services for the mortuary. But it took a long time for them to come. It took hours.
Yeah. The other area of concern of yours, of course, is the security area. I mean, what happened there? Was there a lapse in security? I suppose it's a patient that is already admitted. I suppose nobody would have thought that a patient is going to work up and walk around the wards and steal cell phones.
I mean, you can't blame the doctors or the nurses for something like that. And I must say, the security is an outside security company, and they do a very good job of controlling access, etc. So the security at Helen Joseph is actually very good. But, you know, and I didn't have a problem with the security services, but I had a problem now. I'm in an environment where a fellow patient, a ward or two away, could come and steal something from me in the middle of the night. And this person they looked like they were mad. Is this the same kind of person who could come and stick a fork in my neck or something, you know? So that's not a failure of security. It's just an unfortunate reality inside the institution that you're sharing beds with some people that are a bit questionable when it comes to their sanity.
Yeah. Has anybody reached out to you with this investigation? The portfolio committee also saying they want some more details because what could come out of social media might lack context, so they would like to get a little bit more context in terms of this issue.
The MEC for Health, as well as the Gauteng Premier, Panyaza Lesufi, came to my bedside and spent 2 hours with me last night. We had a wonderful conversation about my experience. We spoke about the challenges they've got with staff. We spoke about the infrastructure challenges, how things could be speeded up, like painting the hospital and putting new vinyl on floors and mattresses and easy stuff being done first. We spoke for 2 hours. At the end, they said we must have coffee at some point. Bye-bye, Tom, thanks a lot. I said, thanks a lot. And off they went. But by this morning, I believe I was being called an agent for another political party that was against the NHI, which is not true. I'm not a member of any political party. The only thing that did happen when I arrived at Morningside was Minister Gayton McKenzie picked up on the story and sent a representative of his party to come and assist me to get into Morningside Clinic. And so there was a PA representative facilitating my entry. And then they asked some of their supporters on the PA site to donate money because I didn't have money to get in there. I was asking family and friends and supporters of mine to please donate. And they also asked their supporters to please donate. And so there's this perception that Gayton McKenzie paid for me to go to Morningside Clinic, which is just patently untrue. In fact, the only thing that I felt I got from Minister McKenzie was that I had a feeling that somebody in government had my back and was going to try and make things a bit easier for me just by their presence, and I appreciated that. But I'm not a personal friend of Gayton McKenzie. The last time I saw him was when I interviewed him on Talk Radio 702 20 years ago when he came out of prison. I'm not a member of the PA, but I was appreciative that their members donated a little bit of money to me and that someone from the party came and said, Tom, we're going to help you get into this hospital. Like literally helped walk me in because I was so ill. And now all of a sudden, Gayton McKenzie paid for my treatment and was paid for my stay here, which is just nonsense. And now all of a sudden, I'm some proxy for some secret proxy for a secret political party against the NHI. And nothing could be further from the truth. And what I'm feeling is that when you speak truth to power in South Africa, then the tidal wave of propaganda that comes against you is so great that you're tempted to keep quiet and not say another word.
Yeah. Tom, appreciate your time, man. Thank you very much for your intervention and for sharing that story.
It's only a pleasure, Thabo. And may I just say, this is not about Tom London. This is about all the comments underneath my videos where people have said the same thing as me. South Africans from all walks of life who've said a very simple thing. Please, doctors, treat us like human beings with some dignity because that's what we deserve. And that was the point I was trying to make.
Appreciate your time. Tom London, the former broadcaster who brought that story and put that video on social media, as you hear him there to say, he was just simply asking for better treatment, not just for himself, but for all the other patients that he saw there being treated unfairly.